because I know
Oh
Cindy
yeah, of
was
course.
planning on coming. She emailed me earlier. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, Tommy. Melissa, so my name is Molly Honest. I'm founder of Echo Consulting. I have been in project management for the last 10 years. I work with a lot of different clients. It's great. Let's get to the good stuff. So I'm the question queen. I love questions. Don't hesitate to reach out throughout the presentation, ask questions. We can dig deeper. Echo Consulting, we believe that it's more than just picking the right software, the right tool, the right process, but it's really maximizing the opportunity throughout and focusing on continuous improvement. So basically, we don't just get you from point A to B. We're looking for kind of that long-term continuous improvement. So today, to start us off, when we're talking about time estimation, we're first going to talk about definitions. So there's this concept of effort, work, which are time units to complete, versus the duration of time over which the work occurs. And so anytime you're estimating, the first thing you have to do is determine, either you or as your team, if you are talking about the time units versus the duration. So we're going to talk about a couple of different examples for both of those. Welcome, Sarah. We're just getting started. So again, effort, defining what the time units are versus duration, how much time it's going to take. So for example, if you were, you know what I mean, creating a new document, for example, a requirements document, most likely you would end up needing to determine that it might take, okay, 8 hours of time, but that time is not going to happen in one day, right? It's going to happen over the course of time because, one, you probably don't have an 8-hour chunk of time available. Two, you're probably going to have to go to other people, get input, think, get reviews and things like that. So that's the difference between effort and Melissa, I don't know if I have the newest version here, but okay, scenario buying a new house. So the example we're going to use throughout the presentation today is about buying a new house and how you would go ahead and break that work down into editable chunks. And the reason we're going to use buying a house is because most everyone has some concept of the high level steps involved. So if I say, you know what, I really want to get a new house, one, it's an insane market in Vermont right now, but like, let's say I wanted to go that route, what do I have to do? So first I have to determine, like, do I already have a house that I need to get on the market? How am I going to move from either my existing apartment or a house and get into the new one? So these are the extremely high level steps that I would have to go through, which is, you know, get under contract for selling my house, get under contract for buying a new house and moving from point A to point B. If that was an apartment versus a house versus a condo, there's different steps involved in that, right? So what are the steps that come to mind when planning to buy a new house? Name as many as you can think of. We're going to skip this just because we got a couple of participants today. So we're going to go ahead and skip that one for now. If you go ahead and Google steps to buy a house, you will find hundreds, literally hundreds of ways to break down the steps to buy a house, right? Lots of different brokers have different ideas, lots of different organizations moving, etc. And they all have different ways. Now, this all gets you from point A to point B, right? But there's different components that might be more important to you or this process throughout. And the way that you visualize it and break down the work is a way that should make the most sense to you as the person that is responsible for buying the house, right? So let's keep going here. So scenario is we're buying a new house. So now we're breaking down the 5 really big steps that first came to mind that were logical to us. And we're going to start breaking it down into the next level. Okay. So the really important note here, it's in the bottom right. When you start to break down work, the number one mistake that people make is they try to break down the work and schedule it at the same time. And what ends up happening is you end up losing track of specific tasks or losing track of this idea. The important thing is instinctually, what are those biggest components that make sense to you organizationally of the different steps that would take, and then to go ahead and provide the tasks that are associated with that major activity, and then do the scheduling piece after. So if there's one thing to take away, a work breakdown structure should be first be logical to you in the way that you think of it, and then the schedule is something that is separate. So when we're talking about duration and we say, okay, I want to buy a house, this is 2020, we haven't, not 2021 yet. So there's a couple of different ways to think about the duration. The first thing you could say is, okay, I want to move by this date. This is my target. And then start moving everything behind it in terms of, okay, well, if I want to move by this date, then I have to have a house selected by this date because I know that this is going to take this amount of time. So it's moving backwards. That is a typical way of using duration to inform the schedule and start understanding kind of how long it's going to take. Is start with what your goal is and then work backwards from there. The other way, so let's do this example again with scenario buying a new house. So we've got, okay, we need to get pre-approval for certain money, find a house get under contract. This can be anywhere from a couple of weeks to, oh my gosh, this is going to take 6 months because nothing is on the market, right? So this can be a big chunk, different duration, depending on the requirements, depending on the market, depending on a lot of other things, right? There's also this component of current house ready for sale, find buyer for current house, pack up. How long are these things going to take you, right? What duration is this going to take you? Not how many hours, but what's the duration of time that this is going to take? So the very first way to think about it is to break up the time, is to actually not do hours at all, but start using ranges and to do instinctual estimates. And so one of them, progressive elaboration, is called the t-shirt size method. So it's this idea that small, medium, large, extra large, and you're starting from a very instinctual gut reaction. How big is this compared to other tasks, for example? The most important thing, this is especially useful with like teams or getting validation from someone really quickly on how long you think something's going to take. You start by determining what you are actually measuring. So are you measuring the entire project or initiative or goal that you have? So it's like, oh, okay, like implementing a new change management process versus, adding a change order template, right? One's a small project that has a certain benefit to it, and one's an extra large project that requires cross-functional alignment and a whole bunch of other things. Okay, so what are you measuring? Are you measuring at the project level? Are you measuring it at the task level, activity, everything like that? The next thing to do with the t-shirt method is to define the measurements. So what does small equal? What does medium equal? What does large, extra large? Depending on if you're doing a project versus a task versus it depends on what your small, medium, large, extra large are. So oftentimes this t-shirt method I will use with a team or with a company that's doing, for example, annual planning, and they have all of these different ideas and they're trying to come up with a budget and they're trying to come up with, okay, what are we working on first, etc. We start, here's the list of everything that we need. Here's small, medium, large, comparatively speaking, what's the largest, what's the smallest, based on, again, instinctual, not a ton of information at this point. Okay, but we do need to make sure that we're using the same measurements when we're talking about small, medium, large. Most importantly, this is typically a range. So if we're talking annual planning, budget planning, etc., usually it's 1 month, 1 to 2 months, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, year plus, or something like that. Does make sense? Everyone heard of the t-shirt method of estimation before? No. All right. Well, this is a fun one. It's easy.
Can you clarify one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Is that in hours, or is it really 1 to 2 days or 1 to 2 weeks? Are you just estimating duration as a calendar concept or a number of hours spent?
So we're still talking duration at this point.
Okay.
Yep. And the measurements, this is just an example, but the measurements you define either with your team or what that looks like. So if you're talking about a task level, then maybe you are talking in terms of effort versus duration. In most cases, I use the t-shirt size method in a duration format versus an effort format. Small, medium, large, instinctual, duration. Great question. All right. So we just mentioned kind of this idea of progressive elaboration, which is one of the biggest things. And again, I come from a software implementation background, so I work with a lot of developers or more technical resources that can get really intimidated and defensive about providing estimates when they don't have enough information yet. right? Work with a lot of people that are just like, I don't know enough information to be able to give you an accurate estimate. And so one of the important points that I try to drive home with my teams is about the progressive elaboration. As you have new information, you update the estimates that you have. As more information comes in and it's more specific, you become more accurate. So I will actually even go out on a limb and say, okay, for very start, when I'm first kind of ranking a variety of different either projects or goals or tasks, I start with a target of 50% accuracy. And when I say 50% accuracy, what I'm really meaning is that I'm kind of adding some buffer on either side, and we'll talk about some of those strategies in a little bit. But it's this idea that if your team or if you are feeling like totally like I don't have enough information yet, and that information is not available until you dig in deeper, start with, give yourself a threshold of like, okay, 50%. And then usually when I get to the done, like planning, I add some time to it. It's like, okay, now my target is 75 to 80%, depending on like the organization maturity, like how familiar I am with the project that I'm taking on. If you're not a subject matter expert in your space, right, your accuracy of estimates, you need to give yourself some more wiggle room than if you are an expert, you've done this project before, you've done efforts that are similar to this, you're an expert in that organization or that space. Does that make sense? The other one is analysis paralysis. So basically it's like spending too much time analyzing, too much time overthinking. You don't have the right, you become paralyzed, and there's this concept of diminishing returns, right? So it's like there's a certain amount of time that you want to take to plan, to estimate, to get an idea so that you have like a path forward. But at some point you actually become less efficient, less accurate if you spend too much time without getting additional information. So the important thing is get something down, make a hypothesis, write something down, have this initial instinct of what you think it's going to be. Oftentimes, if I'm really stuck with analysis paralysis, I use something called pairwise comparison. So I'm saying this or that, which one is more important than that, or which one is going to take longer, this or that. So instead of looking at a list of things, I'm looking at one versus another, and that helps me break through, or helps the team break through, and be able to, make an instinctual gut call and feel okay moving on, and then adding additional information as it becomes available. Anyone experienced analysis paralysis? I won't quote you on this on the spot. Okay, so we're still moving to a new house, right? And now we're going to look at, okay, so we're looking at this specific step of moving, right? Well, it's a little bit more in depth than just the moving truck, right? You have to break down what are you actually moving. And when you start thinking about those tasks of moving, you're going to move the actual people. Maybe you have a book and computer and technology and furniture and everything like that. There is a logical order of what you're going to put in the truck or pack up into boxes first, right? What do we pack into boxes first when we move? We typically pack books or pictures or things that we don't use every day, right? We start with those things first because we want to be able to still live, but start the progress because we know that we can't get every single thing done in a single day. But at the same time, we don't want to not be able to live for the next week while we're moving, right? So there's that balancing of preparing ahead of time, but also being able to continue with operations, continue on now before, again, I'll use tech terms like the actual cutover, the actual move. So you want to be able to have a good quality of life, a good quality of as long as possible, and then make that cutover. Make sense? So we instinctually know in our heads, okay, I'm going to pack this first and then that and then that. So what the goal is in this time estimation and duration, everything like that, is to take what is in our head in the order of the tasks and the size of the tasks and the estimates, and actually put it into something concrete that we can then point to, being like, these were my assumptions, this was my goal, this is why I think it's going to take this amount of time. And when possible, being able to actually like articulate so that we if I start with my books and I thought it was going to take 2 hours and it actually took 4, well, then I can kind of replicate that out to the other tasks, being like, oh, okay, well, actually, I was pretty significantly under what I thought it was going to take. I need to double everything else out and then look at what my schedule is, how much time it's going to take. right? Or no, you know what? The books took so long because I wasn't ready to move. I didn't know where the tape was. I didn't know where the scissors. I didn't know where the boxes were. Now I've gotten into the habit. I now know how to do it. It's actually going to take me less time. My estimates are actually accurate. So this idea of doing kind of like little mini retrospectives on like, am I on target? Am I in good shape? Do I need to adjust anything to make sure that I'm going to hit my plan? So we've been talking about it, this hierarchical decomposition of the work, right? So how are we going to take these big activities and break them down into smaller chunks that make more sense to us, that we can kind of estimate to? And then how do we use our experience with one set of tasks to kind of think out further about, if I'm really over on this or really under on this task, how does that affect my estimates on everything else? If you Google work breakdown structure, you're going to see a lot of these types of diagrams. So what you see is kind of up along top is the high level activity. And then as you break it down, it's more granular, they're smaller. There's different best practices in terms of the activity breakdown, in terms of how specific you get with your tasks. There's that balance between, I don't want to spend so much time on my task list that it takes me more time to check off my task or manage the task list or manage the project plan than it does to actually do the work. But I need to have enough visibility about, okay, this is the most important thing for me to be doing right now compared to the future. So if we look at a activity breakdown and moving, we had talked about, okay, here are all the things I need to move. I need to move from one place to another. But then if we actually talk about moving, we can break it down even more granularly. So the first thing is, maybe we want to consider having someone else move us, because all of a sudden we became rich and we learned from our marital strife the first time around, and now we actually have someone else move us, right? But then that costs more money, and that adds time there too. There's the packaging and the labeling to make sure that when you move, it actually goes into the right room or something. There's hiring people and or getting friends and bribing them to help you move. And the first thing is getting them into the truck. Well, then you have to get them off the truck, and maybe you got to pay people. So again, it's that activity breakdown. We do this pretty logically, but actually writing them down into tasks. And again, this I'm not actually training you on how to move. I'm hoping you get this. The idea is, how do you take a longer term effort and break it down into logical chunks and then actually estimate it out? So again, that's the concept of pictures, books, clothing, maybe the clothing you don't need, you only need a week worth of clothing. Furniture, you end up sleeping on an air mattress before actually going. Food is in your refrigerator if you're going to move it or get rid of it. Kind of, that's all the plans. Okay, so now we're going to go into actual strategies of how to estimate tasks or bigger chunks of work. So the first strategy is called the 3-point strategy, and this is the best case, worst case, and most likely. So these are just phases for project management, but this idea being like, if everything went exactly to plan, exactly the way I think to, and like everything went perfectly and there was no lag in between different tasks and I could just go for it, it's only going to take me 1 month, right? But in the worst case, if I have to wait for this person, wait for the lawyer, wait for this, like it's going to take me 4 months. That's the worst case. It's going to take 4 months of duration over the course. Same thing with planning. Like best case, I get everyone has availability for meetings. Everyone can give me feedback on time. Okay, best case is 4 months. Worst case is 8. And you do this. And the goal here is, whether you're doing this by yourself or with a team, is you focus on the best case, then you focus on the worst case, and you do not let yourself do the most likely case until you've looked at the best and the worst case, right? Now, it's also very important that most likely is not an average of best case and worst case. Most likely is its own estimate that you do that says, this is what I think the most likely scenario is. In some cases, right, that is an average. It is halfway in between. But in some cases, you think the most likely scenario is the best case, for example, or is closer to the best case. This oftentimes is examples where you've done a project like this before, you've done an initiative like this before, you have some sort of historical reference or experience, and you feel pretty confidently that that is how long it's going to take, right? So now you have a range. If you were talking to your manager and you were saying, hey, I really want to take on this effort, best case, it's going to take about, 10 months. Worst case, it's going to take almost 2 years, but I really think I can get this done in just over a year. right? This is how I broke it down. This is what it makes sense. Are you good with that? This is a team exercise that I use. Again, a lot of times software development, although I've done it with a engineering team as well. And this idea is estimation poker. And I think I have a set of cards here. I use this with my teams when they love it. And you can do this even, you can do this online too. If everyone can see I don't even know if you can see my screen right now. I'm holding it up. But there's this idea that you have a task or you have a activity that you're doing, and you want to get everyone to weigh in blindly on how long it's going to take and do it instinctually. So the way estimation poker works is usually you have cards. It can literally be a sticky note or on a piece of paper, but you give everyone a 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. If you are in the development space or software development, sometimes these are called story points. Sometimes these are hours. You're not looking to get every single hour. This could be weeks. You again determine what your measurement is. Are you using effort, which are time time units, or are you using duration? So it's always important to focus on duration versus effort. Which one are you estimating? The other piece is you basically say, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. I want to add this new change order process. I want to do this new change management that if we're going to change our process, you have to document it here and tell people, or we're going to change to Microsoft Teams instead of emails. So we're going to have to do this adoption process and roll it out and train everyone on it. How long do we think that's going to take? If we, set up teams and send out documentation. And if you have 2 or 3 people that are kind of in that realm, they're part of the project, they have some idea of how long it might take because they have experience rolling out Slack or some other system, you can kind of all get on here and you say, all right, how long is it going to take? 3, 2, 1. All right, so I think it's going to take 5 weeks to roll out, or 5 months, depending on what your measurement is. Okay, but Melissa said 13. Melissa said 13, but Sarah, Tommy, Cindy, and I all said 3 to 5. Well, what does Melissa know that none of us do, right? She's an outlier. So interestingly enough, when you're doing estimation poker, it's a way to get buy-in for the team, but it's also a way to identify outliers, because someone might have information that the rest of the team doesn't have. And that's a great way to identify risks that might happen. Or maybe Melissa has experience because in her last company, she rolled out Slack and they thought it was going to just be a quick month thing, and it ended up taking like an entire quarter because they couldn't get people, they couldn't get meetings, the training didn't go clear, et cetera, like that. So it's important when you're doing this that you say 3, 2, 1, everyone puts it out there. It's their instinctual guess based on their personal experience. And then you look at, oh, okay, we're all in the same realm, or, oh, hey, someone's an outlier. What do they know that we don't know, that we should know? And do we need to estimate again based on that information that they gave us? Has anyone played estimation poker with a team? Understand? You kind of get the idea of it? Blind data, what people's guesses are, instincts, and then looking for outliers. All right, don't hear a question. I'm going to keep moving. All right. Often cases, even with teams, or if you're an individual, et cetera, you're providing the estimates yourself. You'll go through and you'll make your best guess. As a project manager, I am not an expert in this new compliance portal that we are rolling out to our engineers. But as a project manager, I'm putting the project plan together. I have to make guesses based on my best effort so I can kind of give us a place to start. And then oftentimes I'm looking for maybe a manager or a director or someone that doesn't have much time, isn't necessarily booked to my project or my effort, but I need some sort of weigh-in. The fastest way to get some input is red, yellow, green, right? So it's like, look at the estimate. Here's my breakdown. Here's what I think, and just say, red, yellow, green. Yeah, this is good. Double check this. Maybe they have a note, or red, like you are completely off your game. Like this is gonna this is going to be way different. And so whether this is the list of tasks that you need to complete or the amount of time, oftentimes the fastest, easiest way, lowest barriers to entry or barriers is to just do a really quick color coding instinctually, which is like, yep, this is good. Nope, this is not. And again, always remembering to define for your audience what red, yellow, and green means, right? Because you can say red, and red could mean that it's going to be way more time, way more effort, way more budget than that. Or red could mean it's going to be way under. It could just mean you're accurate. So it's important when you're doing color coding to make sure that you're clearly articulating a really quick legend of what red, yellow, and green means. In project management, we use red, yellow, and green mostly for like status, stoplight, right? But this can still be used as an expert factor for estimates. One of the ways that this is that this plays out actually, if you've ever done like fantasy football or something like that, where you're seeing multiple experts and they're all kind of weighing in, and then you show kind of based on the range if you are if you're part of that or not. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. All righty. So we talked a little bit about, let me just really quick. So we've talked about 3-point, best case, worst case, most likely case, right? So you're providing a range. We've talked about a team process where we're talking estimation poker. So people are giving instincts and then you're looking for outliers. We've talked about the expert factor where someone is giving the first pass and then they're getting someone to say, yep, red, yellow, green. Is this, do you think that this is accurate or not? And again, I use with my teams, I don't know if you can see, but I have these little cards that I use. This was back when people are in person, but you can do this, red, yellow, and green here too, which is like, okay, this is the plan. Do we think this is a good plan, green? Do we think this is a bad plan, red? Or do we think, hey, I think we need to spend a little bit more time on this. It doesn't really make sense to me. So these are, again, basically mandatory participation. Everyone on the call, everyone in the team is kind of weighing in, being like, yep, I think that makes a lot of sense, or no. And instead of having it be like an opt-in, being like, hey, does anyone have a question? Or, hey, does anyone have, something that might go wrong? Instead, require everyone to tell you whether they're green, yellow, or red to make sure that they're, following along and staying with you. So next up is contingency. So I talked a little bit earlier about if you have an estimate, what's your confidence threshold? Again, trying to make this like numeric. So, okay, I have an estimate of 2 months that initiation is going to take, and I'm about 75% confident. Okay. There's a couple of different ways to build in contingency. One is based on confidence, and one is based on actually giving a percentage of contingency. So if I was 75% confident, right, and I'm saying I need 15% contingency. Now, there's 2 different ways of doing this. The first way is you have your original effort. You say, you know what, I'm 75% confident. Then what I could say is, okay, I'm multiplying this by 0.75 and 0.125. So I'm giving myself a 25% gap on either side in terms of the range. Or you can actually make a call directly, which is not on your confidence threshold, but saying like, okay, this is how much contingency I need. Let's multiply the original effort times the contingency. Okay, so I have an extra, the total that I'm asking for time is going to be 2.3 months instead, because I'm adding contingency of 0.3 months. Again, I'm just using the months example. You have to decide your own measurement. Okay. So same idea, you take an original effort, you say, how confident am I, or confidence or contingency. Okay, I want 20% contingency here. So that means I'm actually saying 4.8. One of the things with this, and I have this total over here, 13, it's really important. So the contingency time is 2 months. It's important to keep your original estimates as they are. So if you think it's going to take 11 months, that is your estimate. That is what your team is going towards. That's what you're going towards. This contingency is giving, is separate, and you have to add the contingency to the project if you need it, or to the initiative if you need it. You don't up your estimates to be 2.3, 4.8, 5, 1.02. Like that's not what happens then is we have as humans, like our new target is 2.3, right? The important thing is that you're still targeting the original duration, the original effort, but as a manager of your team, or as a as a leader, as a budget manager, you kind of have this contingency bucket, which is completely separate, that you have the ability to add if there's something that comes up that was unexpected, to still keep it without, getting escalated. Does that idea of contingency time make sense, and the importance of keeping it separate than the original estimates? All right. Oh, we were quick. Okay. That's it. I guess I talked really fast today. So anyways, if you're interested, we can send out a PDF of this deck. We have a post-webinar survey. We offer training for teams on estimation, and actually providing a process for estimating major projects. So happy to do that. And we also will send a video of this because we're recording, and I will stop the recording right now.